This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, I'll call to order the meeting of Stratford Housing Partnership for October 30th at 1:03 p.m. First order of business is approval of the minutes of the October 22nd meeting. Is there a motion? By Mr. Watson.
Motion to approve.
And Becca Ponte, all in favor say any corrections, changes, annotations? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 No. Carries unanimously. On to the continued discussion of booklet number 4. Glenn, we'll give it over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I think one of the things for us to talk about today also might be preparations for the November 17th meeting. Susmitha brought to my attention, I think, after talking with people at Town Hall, that in my opinion, we were sort of well into the process in terms of developing and talking about strategies. But Susmitha pointed out that we're really not that far as the community is concerned. So originally I had anticipated as part of the joint meeting between planning and zoning that we would actually start to get into strategies. And that's pretty far down the road in terms of discussion. And we may not be ready for that yet because I don't feel, as your advisor and assistant and everything else, that we're really at the point of consensus yet. So I think it makes sense for us to perhaps, if I can divert the discussion here at the beginning just a little bit, is to go into the meeting in November. And so Susmitha had a great idea that we identify through material which I had sent out yesterday, which is a summary of housing issues and concerns. And there are 10 different concepts on this list. And it would be useful and helpful for us to go around the room and ask the members of the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission which of these are the most important to them. So they could pick sort of their top 3. And I think on that basis, we could identify the things that are concerns or issues on the part of people. Some of these are things that people might want to accomplish, and other things are things they might want to prevent. But I think it helps set the stage for us now going forward. Following the last meeting, I reconfigured the potential strategies because there were certain things that we had eliminated or weren't prepared to consider at this time. But even still, I look at the organization of these strategies and I'm not sure yet that it represents the priorities of the partnership or the priorities of the community. And I think it's really going to be kind of important for us going forward, because I think one of the outcomes for this is not just the housing plan, but it's also going to feed into the POCD, is that we get that information about the issues or concerns. And then I think as the partnership, we can also come up with strategies to address those particular issues or concerns. And there may be other strategies that we might want to recommend. But in terms of preparations for the 17th, I wanted to sort of start off with that, because it might take off some of the pressure that I felt of trying to work through the strategies. And I think we should be moving ahead purposefully, but I don't think we have to be ready to have strategies or solutions on the 17th, because we haven't yet heard from them what the issues or concerns might be. So if it's all right with you, Chris, I think if we can sort of talk that out, that might be helpful.
Susmitha, you had a comment?
Yes, Chris, I agree with Glenn, and it's my fault maybe that there was a miscommunication here, because I was in my head under the impression that it's going to be an introductory meeting with all the land use boards and not really an intermediate or a conclusionary meeting. We can have another one maybe when we are at that stage, when we have arrived at conclusions, or we're in the stage where we can report more findings from the public. But this one is more about asking everyone else what they think and not just us, and hearing their perspectives. Now that the committee is well informed with some of those issues and some of the potential strategies, that will also, I think, bring them a perspective on what is actually the missing piece here, and are we able to relate to that as a partnership, or how far or how distanced are we from that concern right now?
Okay. Go ahead, Harold.
Yes, I think I don't disagree with either of what I heard here. The only thing that I think we have to be mindful of is that we need to let our land boards know that we are, we've done a lot of work in terms of putting together strategies and looking at specific items. And I don't know if we should share our potential strategies document with them before this meeting so that they come in with, they don't end up asking us every basic question. They have some sense of where we've gone. That it might be useful for those people who have a deep understanding of some of these issues. It might be helpful to know that we have discussed them in some point. Not everybody would be interested, but there are people I know that have their own points that they would be very interested in speaking about. So it might be a better way to make this an introductory with a layer of depth to it also for the planning board.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I think Harold raises a good point. I think I wouldn't want the members of planning or zoning or other people who may participate or attend the meeting or watch the meeting to think that we've made our minds up yet on what these strategies might be. So I think the issue could be, we can talk about some of the categories of things that we're thinking about. I think, for example, one of these is that the housing authority is going to be an important entity in terms of addressing housing needs in the future. And so we're looking at opportunities to encourage the housing authority to continue to seek solutions to some of these challenges. The funding programs were basically from the 60s and 70s. And so maybe we can look at ways to do that. But I don't think it's the number one strategy necessarily. I think as we talked at the very beginning in some of the materials that we were putting together, that there was concern about housing for an aging population and housing for kids and making Stratford a vibrant community, I think is what we had talked about, that we had used the phraseology. It might have been Desmond at one point in time, talked about, I'm not sure who had the phrase, uncork the bottle, so that we can provide sort of housing choices and diversity and those types of things. And so I think if we approach the meeting as a way to learn what the issues are that other people are concerned about and talk about the families of strategies that could address those. We don't have an unlimited time period on the 17th. I don't know how long this meeting might go for, but
An hour and a half.
Yeah, so I think in 90 minutes, we got to be careful about getting too far out in the weeds. I think the issue would be, what are your issues or concerns? What are your top 3 on the list by the number of 10? Chris, for example, might at the meeting say, well, I'm concerned about 4, 7, and 2. And we say, okay, and we keep track of what those issues are that people are concerned about. And that I think could help inform us in terms of what we might do. But by getting people to talk about their concerns, their issues, their experiences, their vision for Stratford with regard to housing, I think we widen our circle a little bit before we actually get into the details too much on strategies. But we've got enough work done that I think we could respond to questions, or people might say, well, how are we going to deal with the issue of blank? And the issue is, well, there's a couple of strategies we've been thinking about that could address that and approach the conversation that way. So I think, again, I apologize to you because I think we've been into the process for a while that I felt we were further down the road, but I realized because of COVID, we haven't really kind of reached out and got that sort of input, and it's hard to do. But I think for a community as a whole, but I think for the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission, I think this gives us an opportunity to sort of calibrate what those thoughts or issues are. So go ahead, Beth.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little confused about this whole process. I mean, I thought our task was to come up with possible strategies and then bounce them off of others. If we're going in there like a blank slate and having a conversation, and asking people, so what do you think? What should we be working on? That is something that we should have done months ago, and not at this point. And I would hope that the expectations for this committee are higher than that, that we would be going in with some sort of, proposed or yeah, showing that we have already thought about these issues more than this. So I have to say I'm a bit disappointed about this process and that we're having this conversation today.
Thank you.
Susmita, and then I'm going to say a couple things after. I'll let you hear what you have to say.
Yes, thank you, Beth, for your concerns, what you stated right now. And I was sensing this too a little bit after our last meeting, that maybe somewhere we haven't been very clear on, maybe it was a misinterpretation from the partnerships end, or maybe we weren't clear. I don't know where the disconnect is. But I just want to, read out what the powers and duties of the partnership are as based in the ordinance first. So we get a clear idea about what the partnership has to do or is supposed to be do or charged with doing, and what we are trying to do here. Of course, this whole thing of listening to the community could have happened earlier. But considering that our situation has been very, very unique, unprecedented, unforeseen, that we are in a COVID crisis, we can't meet the public, we can't meet anybody in advance. We were still figuring out how our virtual meetings will go and how we will interact with each other. So now I think we've gotten to a level of comfort that with the virtual meetings and hosting 20 people on a virtual meeting, that too 20 people as participants. Not even 20, I think more than 20. We are ourselves 9 here, and then we are looking at another 15 commission members or 14 commission members. So how do we engage everyone online has been something that was, difficult to answer 2 months back. Glenn always wanted an in-person meeting, but we couldn't get one because town hall wasn't allowing anyone to attend in person.
Thank you,
So
Chief.
when you look at what the powers and duties of partnership are, the first one is to examine and identify housing needs and housing opportunities within the town. The second one is to establish the price range of affordable housing. The third one is to explore the availability of any state, municipal, or other land that is suitable for the development of affordable housing. Fourth one is to periodically, yes. Who is it?
Like suburban, like.
Somebody trying to talk? Okay.
Please go on mute if you're not speaking. Thank you.
So the fourth one is to periodically advise the town council as to those properties identified as suitable for development of affordable housing. The fifth one is to review applicable zoning regulations to determine whether such regulations restrict the development of affordable housing in the community, and identify and recommend to the zoning commission any necessary changes. And the sixth one is to develop and activate a long-range plan to satisfy housing needs in the town. So there is nowhere mentioned in the ordinance that the committee must finalize all strategies or recommendations. The committee is assisting in preparation of this plan, in identifying issues accurately, identifying opportunities accurately, establishing some price range for affordable housing, knowing the needs and coming up with some strategies that meet the needs. But ultimately, I think any plan, any amendments to the comprehensive plan or any plan that we develop has to be adopted by the Planning Commission per state statutes. So it's ultimately the Planning Commission that will adopt it, but it doesn't mean that the other commissions and boards don't have a say, because the Zoning Commission has a say on the implementation, zoning regulations. Town Council has a say on the financing piece, how we set the price ranges, and how if there's any town-owned property, how that gets disposed of. So there's a role for everyone here, but when we go to these boards and commissions, I think it's too premature to sit down and start rolling out strategies, because we haven't had the opportunity to talk to them beforehand. And that's why I think we are trying to take a step back here. And Glenn, you can add on to this as I speak.
No, I think, I feel that we had talked about and actually started preparing exhibits for a public informational meeting, thinking that COVID would blow over. Clearly it hasn't, and clearly it's not going to for a while. So I think that we're not as far down the road as far as the community is concerned. And I do think that one of the first things we try to do as part of public policy work is to find out the issues that exist in the community. So this group, because of its diversity, has been very helpful in that. But I think as we widen the circle to 2 boards, which are going to be very involved in these issues, planning because of the POCD and zoning because of possible regulation changes, we need to make sure we understand what their issues or concerns are. So I'll do whatever the committee feels is the right way to go, but I think that approach of asking before telling is a good approach for us to make sure that we're on common ground with both of those important groups.
If I might just add, I think we have this has not been easy. I'll just say this, and I am, you know, concerned about the way we've actually been doing it, because it's not an easy thing to tackle to restart this commission and start from zero. If we had engaged the other boards right at the beginning and say, hey, what do you think about housing? That's not going to be a very productive conversation, but yet we don't want to come to them with something that is, you know, totally baked and then expect them to adopt it. And I will say this: I've heard many a person say that, oh, you guys just got to change your zoning regulations to do X, Y, and Z. No, make no mistake. As a longtime veteran of the zoning commission, we are a legislative and a judicial body. I always say that we have 2 powers. We're the only type of organization that has that role, possibly with the exception of the British House of Lords, but we won't even talk about that. But anyway, so we take any change to the law very seriously, because you are going to affect a lot of people by the decisions that you make. You are changing existing law. So when you say, okay, we just got to change the zoning regulations, the text becomes very important, the implementation becomes very important, and the map becomes very important. So getting buy-in from the commission as to what their priorities are and what their thoughts are and what is actually feasible and what other factors that might not be directly connected to housing but have other zoning ramifications have to be taken into consideration. So you know, we'll just keep that in the back of our heads, and it might be very difficult to get consensus on 10 items at one shot. If we come away with a few of them that we can implement quickly, but I don't know that this body doesn't have a time frame on it. It may be something that every couple of years, this body, and maybe not us, but maybe our successors, bring forth other ideas as the situation changes. Life is very fluid as to what the long-term trends are going to be post-COVID world. So let's just keep that in the back of our mind as well.
Understood. Okay. Yep. So in terms of preparation for the meeting in November, there's 2 possibilities here. I think one was to ask people what sort of housing related issues or concerns they have. And so I thought, Chris, that might be easier by having a 10-point list. So rather than just having people try to think of something, I went around to housing plans from other communities in Connecticut, and these were the 10 things that seemed to come up most often. So I thought that this was a possible starting point for that conversation. I do think, based on what Harold said, it might make sense for us to have another handout for people, which they would get before the meeting, which would talk about families of strategies. And then I feel we have set the table for a discussion about people's concerns and visions, if you will. Even if it's, we like things the way they are, don't make any changes. People certainly have the ability to say that. But I think, as Susmitha read the charge of the housing partnership, that we might want to consider that possibility and maybe think of some other ones to recommend to different boards or commissions, recognizing again that the zoning commission is going to have some significant responsibilities, perhaps, based on the different recommendations. And that responsibility does need to be treated very carefully. So if we go to the meeting on November 17th by sharing this possible housing issues page beforehand and families of strategies page beforehand, does that sound like a reasonable approach? Are we comfortable with that?
Go ahead, Harold.
I can speak from planning. I think that I've spoken about the housing issues with our planning board already. What they want to know about is, well, that's all well and good, but when it gets down to rubber on the road, what are the strategies that you're suggesting to us? What are we talking about? And the only other thing on this list here is the only other comment I would make is that because most of our arguments are about volume, size, that if we could have something in here, what is appropriate to Stratford? Because that's going to come up. That is the general population's first question they ask always.
Yep. Yeah, so I thought 9 and 10 on the list was kind of meant to get to that one, Harold, but
Yeah, well, it does, but you might as well
I
be
understand.
upfront about it, because that is something that always comes up in any
Yep.
discussion.
And so my thought of the meeting, if it is an hour and a half, Chris and others, that we might take the first 20 to 30 minutes to ask the different members of planning and zoning to, looking at this list, what are the 3 concerns which are most impactful for you? So they could share their ideas. Then the next 30 minutes could be addressing the common thread of what people talked about and what potential strategies from the family of strategies could address those sorts of issues. And then the last 30 minutes, we could see sort of where the conversation was leading us. So I think that in terms of a roadmap for the meeting, it's both a combination of asking them what their concerns are, and hopefully they're on this page, or if they're not, they certainly should. I hope they would express those. And then possible strategies that Stratford might consider to move ahead. And I think, Harold, as you indicate, one of the families of strategies that's in the booklet here is, again, sort of design guidelines and making sure that we have, as the mayor had said at one of our earlier meetings, that the redevelopment of the school site in the center of town was, there were certain aspects of the development that people weren't happy with, but I think it was the townhouse size and scale was something that generally people agreed with.
Absolutely.
So if that's the message that comes out of this, housing diversity has to fit, or housing choices or options have to fit. We're not talking high rises, but we are, if we say to a developer up front, as in the TOD districts, we do have design guidelines, and we don't have those in other places. So if that provides a foundation going forward, we say, listen, you know, housing will be more compatible with Stratford for the more of these things which are on that list. That's an important guideline going forward. And that may be the #1 issue that we come up with. I'm not sure. But I want to make sure that I represent the housing partnership work fairly, accurately, and get good feedback on the 17th. And so I think that, again, I think based on Susmitha's input, I think that could be a good way for us to go. And I'm hoping that you might agree or give me some additional guidance.
In terms of this immediate meeting, I think it makes sense. Gives you a half hour, it gives the commission members a half an hour, and it gives us a half hour to do some kind of a summary. I think that's, for me, that sounds like the best outcome that we can expect for what we have.
Chris, in terms of you're familiar with the zoning commission, do you think that approach, those topics might work for them, or are there other things that you think we should also add into the list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help narrow down the scope. And I mean, if there's some things that people have, if there's a consensus that emerges, it obviously probably would be beneficial for everybody to focus on those things where we think that there would be opportunities to move forward. And, you know, let's not think that this is a one and done. You know, we can obviously schedule additional meetings, you know, if the case may be, if more discussion is needed, or if we come to no consensus, we might have to work a little bit more to narrow things down. Beth?
Yeah, when I look at this list, a lot of what we've been talking about, or some of what we've been talking about, is modifications to existing properties, and we don't have anything on here. #9 is about how new housing development. I think you should also ask about concerns about modifications to properties in my neighborhood will affect my property value.
Do that, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, because one thing that came up in the last meeting was the possible allowing of duplexes and multifamily units in single residential districts, and that could cause a lot of discussion, I can tell you. So that should probably find a place in here someplace. maybe
Yeah,
even a subset
explicitly,
of number
yes.
10, you know.
Yeah, so I think that the 10 list, the 10 items was meant to give people an opportunity to think about how housing could address the needs of aging parents or, children or grandchildren or other situations, critical workers, et cetera. And the strategies, again, will be a separate handout piece, but that might identify some reg changes which could address those issues. And if people say that, they would favor this type of thing, and I think as Harold said, provided that there's design guidelines, okay, that's very helpful information for us. Or they may say, I'm opposed to that concept across the board. That's good information for us as well. So I think it could help us narrow down the types of things that would work in Stratford. And I think, as you point out, Chris, that even the longest journey begins with a single step, and so we may find some modest changes to regulations and other things that occur today, and are highlighted for more short-term action, and other things which get pushed down the road, and we'll see what happens on the first situation, and push some other things down for future action. So I think that could be helpful for us as well.
Okay.
So I think that my approach for the meeting would be to prepare handouts that I'll give to Susmitha to distribute to the members of the boards and commissions beforehand. I think Chris, Susmitha and I will probably work with you for just a little cover memo, or you and Harold as chairs and members of the Housing Partnership, what our goal is for the meeting. And we're going to try to get that out to them sometime in the next week or 10 days so that they have, let's say, a week to review it before the meeting on the 17th. And I think at that point in time, we're probably good.
Okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Who is caller 2 on this list? I just want to know who is on caller 2. Is it Jennifer Sheldon or Chris Blake?
It might be me. I'm not too sure. It looks like it is. Jay
Okay,
Habansi.
Jay. Okay, Jay. Great.
Hi, Jay.
So, Chair, I think, for some reason, some of our members haven't been able to attend the meetings regularly. Like Jennifer Sheldon has been away, and she's, I think, away for the next 2 weeks too. So I'll try to reach out to her. And then there is also Chris Blake, who hasn't been there for a couple of meetings. I will try to take, talk to him as well separately and let him know what the process has been so far. And I think, if I may suggest, for the clarity of this committee's sake, and for those who we will be reaching out to, which will be a larger group, having a time frame or a schedule of what to expect next, and when likely would this process come to an end, or so that, and also like how everybody is feeling here right now, Glenn, I think the public may feel that way too, that they have been not having an opportunity to be part of this, and somehow we have to figure out a way how to do this with the public as well in the coming months. And I want to know like what the interest is in meeting in December, if anybody wants to meet, or if we can take that time off and do an online survey and engage the public, and then keep continuing refining the strategies and coming back in January with more information from the public, from the commissions, and some refined strategies. I just wanted to see what direction the partnership wants to give us on this.
Harold, go ahead.
Yes, my first concern is that we started this committee with the understanding that Glenn did not have unlimited time. So I just want us to be mindful that whatever his contract states, that we still have our fearless consult here, because I think that's critical to us continuing our work.
Harold, I'll just jump in. Thank you for your concern. I think that I'm sort of a different consultant breed in the sense that I am committed to working with Stratford and the Housing Partnership to finding a way to configure a housing plan that works for the community. So I'm not a strict number meeting limit or anything else type of person. I will work with you to get there. I realize, as Chris had said earlier, that the committee members have other things going on as well. And so I think there is interest on everybody's part in terms of moving forward purposefully. And I want to be with you and help you along that journey. So I'm mindful of the time commitments, but I'm also supportive of the work that you're trying to accomplish, and I'd like to try to help you. So I wouldn't worry about that at this point in time. If it gets to the point that I need to vent a little bit, I may, but we're not there yet. So thank you for thinking of that.
In that vein, is there a date where we have to have the plan adopted by state statute? Is there a requirement for that?
There is, Chris, but I think it's not a helpful date. In other words, the statutory date for the preparation of a housing plan is required by section 82J of the statutes is June of 2022.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's in our best interest to take that long. I think that realistically, if we were to move forward, I think, as Smith indicated, we could put together a schedule that gets us to a document in the first quarter of 2021 for adoption. And again, that can be refined as time goes on by the continuing work of the housing partnership. So I think we get to a point where we say, let's pull the trigger with this and work with it. The statute does require that each municipality update its plan its housing plan every 5 years. The POCD is every 10 years. But I think that, as you had indicated earlier, Chris, we can start off and make it a work in progress and continue to work on this in the future.
Okay.
Not a perfect response to your question, but.
Well, no, that was a good response, because if you told me, February of next year, I'd be like, okay, we really got to kick this into high gear.
But we do have, just as we have COVID fatigue, we can also have policy fatigue. And so I think the issue ends up being, let's get to a concise element of the things we're comfortable with today, and we can have a whole section of the plan or appendix that's possible future issues, and work on that stuff there later. So that's a possibility for us.
Chris, can I ask something to the group?
Certainly.
Yes. So I was talking to Glenn briefly about this a few days ago, and I thought it will be, now that the group has a rough idea about the range of strategies that are out there that Stratford could utilize, and there are some agreements and some disagreements on the strategies, maybe getting best practices, examples from nearby towns, how they implemented, images that show how a development could be done right. And maybe pointing to Beth's concerns on how we can enforce if we had, if the committee felt like, okay, accessory units should be permitted in the town, but then Beth says, they're not, the enforcement of it may not be that easier. So are there any towns that are doing it differently? Looking at examples from nearby and gathering information would also help us arrive at a decision, I think. Some, not too many, but something for each one. What do you think about that?
I think that'd be helpful to know, especially our surrounding neighbors. It's always good to know if there are things that we can be in harmony with them, or maybe sometimes it's even better to be in competition for different reasons. But just to have that perspective, especially if they've had longstanding policies that are similar. I would be careful how you choose them too, to make sure that it matches. Stratford being not, there's a big diversity of towns and just within our immediate, let's say 50 miles of here. You have urban centers, you have the inner ring suburbs, which Stratford is. You have very rural towns. You have places like Shelton that have an urban center and then a lot of rural territory. So there's quite a diversity to choose from, and if anything, that's probably a good thing, just to see the various perspectives that other towns that we can actually go and that we know of. We can actually go up and see what the effect of it has been. So I would say that's probably a good thing to have.
Also, my second question is, how would you feel if Glenn sent out strategies as questions and asked everybody to rank the strategies that they would like to see in the document? on what was discussed so far. Mhm.
Harold, go ahead, because I don't really have a response to that right now.
I have some misgiving about that because some of these strategies have been arrived at through a lot of discussion, and I don't necessarily want us to say yay or nay based on someone checking a list. I think that it takes away from some of the discussions that we've had in depth. It also weights all of them equally. So I don't necessarily want us to step that way right now either, that unless they have some sense of the background, I think we're doing ourselves a disfavor saying, oh, that's something that we have to stop discussion on. I would rather see them educated more towards the issue, towards the strategies that we have looked at and why we ended up with those strategies before we ask them if it's something they could support or not.
I'm also thinking we might want to wait until after the meeting with the land use boards, so we don't have to recalibrate twice. It might be better to have get that input and then only do one calibration, figure out what our next steps are.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Chris. I think that it's a little premature right now. I would like to hear from the planning and zoning commissions, from other participants, if we move ahead with Smith's idea of a community survey where we could start to explore some of these issues and get that feedback. That would, I think, help us calibrate in our own minds things that are stretches for the community and perhaps they're not particularly comfortable with. Never mind that other communities have done this. Stratford may not be ready. In other situations where we say, okay, you know what, these are things that people feel that we could do. But I think that making that decision could be a little bit further down the road, so I wouldn't do that just yet.
So I have one more, sorry, I'm talking too much today, but one last question. In the event that we don't have enough representation at the November 17 meeting, and we don't have full representation from all the members, how would we deal with, how to come up with summarizing issues and strategies after that? Do we have to go back to them, or do we just, it is what it is and move on?
Glenn?
Yeah, my thought would be, I think that any public policy making process really would involve two windows of key input, maybe three. So the first one is an initial action. What are the issues or concerns that Stratford cares about? In a perfect world, we would have done that back in April sometime, maybe May, but we would have sort of set the table, if you will, with the issues that Stratford's concerned about. As the strategies start to come together and we think we have a preliminary direction, I'm a big fan of having a public informational meeting or another meeting with planning and zoning at that time to make sure that if there are issues or concerns that are going to be expressed, that those are expressed and we have a chance to kind of ponder those. And then finally, I would suggest, and I believe the statutes actually require the public hearing on adoption of whatever it is, if it's the housing partnership or whoever. So I think that I think another public meeting or discussion session in the future as we head towards adoption of something would be important for us. I don't think it's one and done, Susmitha. I think that this initial meeting is going to be helpful for us, and then later on, as we have narrowed down some recommendations, have another meeting to check back with them.
Thank you, Glenn.
So I think I will prepare. Oh, go ahead, Harold.
I just wanted to add one thing, and I might. So Smitha, you were talking about sending out the strategies to be able to have people comment and rank them. That actually might be a great document to send as a test to the actual land commissioners and let them know that this is similar. This is what we would like to move forward eventually to the public, but we would like to start by asking you to give us your feelings and comments on them.
Yep.
That's a lot of work for you to do before the 17th, but
No, I don't think so, Harold, because I think we've been working on these for some time. I'm familiar with some. I think that right now the document that we have in terms of potential strategies is 12 pages. There's no way we're going to send out 12 pages. My thought is to distill this down to 1 page and say the families of strategies that we're talking about are as follows. And within those families are things such as, and I think now people say, okay, I see the types of things that you're thinking and talking about, and I would favor these over those. So I think it's not a specific listing of all the detail that we have in this document today, but it's enough for people to feel comfortable that they can understand and give us feedback on.
it oversimplifies it, but I think that's critical to moving, at least planning beyond the 200 plus unit housing that we always get stuck on. So
Yep.
This actually opens up the whole discussion where we want it to be.
Yep. So I will put these materials together so that we can be ready to distribute those. Okay, so I think I feel comfortable now in terms of the prep. Go ahead,
Can I just ask,
ahead,
will the
Beth.
committee have an opportunity to do a quick review of the materials before they're distributed?
I think if the commission, the partnership is comfortable doing so, I think we've been meeting on Thursdays. If you want to get together next Thursday, I would expect to have the materials kind of roughed out soon, and we could get together next week and review those one last time, and then make the final tweaks and send them out to planning and zoning. So if the dates would be, if we met on the 5th, and it's up to you as to which day you're comfortable meeting next week. That gives us almost 2 weeks, 12 days between the 5th and the 17th. So that gives us chances to make any tweaks and then get it to the members of the commissions a week in advance of the meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So I will work with Aileen and Susmitha to get a meeting set up for next Thursday. I think Thursday was the day. I appreciate everybody's willingness to change to a Friday for my professional continuing education credit thing. But next Thursday, does that work? Sound good?
Yes.
Is there
For me.
objection? I can do it. Hearing none, so let it be done.
Okay. I think, where would you like to go next? There's 14 minutes left in the meeting. Do we want to tackle some of the potential strategies, or some of these are sort of too big and we need more time for these and slow down for today? What's the committee's pleasure?
I just want to note that I think it's important that people understand the income thresholds that we're looking at when we talk about affordable housing. And perhaps I'm just speaking personally. I'm not satisfied with the data that we're using or with the explanations of the data. And I've asked repeatedly for more transparency on that. And I'm not getting it. So we really need to nail that down, because if that information is what we're basing our analysis on, I need to feel really comfortable with that information. I'm not comfortable.
Do you have other information, Beth, that you think that we should?
No, I mean, I've asked repeatedly for the citations, for the real, I mean, just give me a document in writing that shows the exact data sources that are being used, which towns are included in the metropolitan areas. I'm very concerned that we are mixing our income up with the income of Bridgeport, and I'm just concerned. So, my concerns may be misplaced, but without the transparency and seeing the exact data sources, I don't know what to do with that. So if you could provide that to me, that would be really great. Thank you.
Yep. You may recall these issues came up earlier. Since that time, I have modified booklet number 2 to address those concerns.
Yeah,
but our discussion had, let me finish. Our discussion had moved on to other topics. So rather than go back and revisit booklet 2, I held off on issuing it at that time. So I think at this point in time, I will work with Smith. We'll give you the revised booklet 2. It's essentially prepared, and then it's got the citations and all of the other stuff.
Okay,
So,
Beth,
that'd be good.
and then we want the data to be accurate, correct, and right as well. The data is what the data is. So we'll share it with you, and then if you have additional thoughts or concerns, we can talk about that.
So Beth, I have something to add based on my experience working in New Haven too. In New Haven also, the housing values are very, very low if you look at them. And again, housing is considered very unaffordable. They have a 32% affordable housing in the city. And it's always been like, why can't the state change the definition for the area median income? Because in the New Haven County, the HUD area median income is different than what incomes people hold in New Haven. And it all boils down to jobs. It all boils down to incomes of people. And it's just that, the mill rate is high because the taxable property is only so much. No matter how much, we try to bring Stratford-centric data to explain how affordable we are and how our incomes are different than rest of the Fairfield County. Unfortunately, state doesn't look at affordable housing definition that way. State defines affordable housing based on HUD metropolitan area income. And if we want to get to a point where we get to the 10% exempt category or maybe a moratorium category, we have to base our data based on what the requirements are. We can, of course, demonstrate that we are far more better community, far more affordable community, but that doesn't change their perception. And somebody has to lobby at the state to actually change the definition. And they tried. New Haven tried really hard, and they're still trying because HUD area incomes are so deceptive. They don't relate to the communities, the urban communities like Stratford and New Haven, where you have diverse populations, blue-collar jobs. Yeah.
I think we can do both. I think what Beth is talking about is Stratford-specific data, and then the way it's measured in terms of compliance with state guidelines is the metro area. But they're really two issues which sort of overlap each other. And I think, as Beth points out, as long as we distinguish between what we're talking about when, we care about Stratford, but it's going to be measured based on the state criteria. So we just need to make sure that we explain this. And I think booklet 2's revised helps push us in that direction.
Yeah, and this is a really foundational issue for what we're doing. So this should be really carefully documented. And I won't be the only one with this concern. And so it would be good to show where we're forced to use different definitions and where we aren't. Just have a detailed memo, a note for the record, something on the methodology here, more than what we've had.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we're 8 minutes left. If there's anything else that people would like to bring up, I think this is a good time to do. Yeah, go ahead, Harold.
I just wanted the document you sent out, potential strategies. I really appreciate your 1.1 organization on it. And this front page covers a lot of the things that we had discussed last week. So you really managed to go back and scrub it in a way that I think makes real sense.
And I think I'm searching for an organization, Harold, and I'll tell you, I'm not sure that we're there yet, but
I understand.
Based on what we hear at the meeting on the 17th, I think it'll shuffle things around again.
Yes.
And I think that's what's important. It's not only what is said, but how it's said. And so I think that I'll distill this down and have it in your hand shortly so that we can talk about it next week.
My only other comment is that poor planning only has one mention all the way at the end. And in Stratford, we have a great relationship between planning and zoning. So I just hope that you will make sure that we're not excluded. We don't just appear on the POCD.
But in terms of the actual adoption or implementation, Harold, your statutory authority is advisory, and that was the challenge. I tried to find places to slot you guys in, and unfortunately,
Except where it comes to developments.
Chris is going to have broad shoulders on some of these. So.
I know that. I like the guy, so it's okay.
Thanks, Harold. Appreciate that.
There you go. Chris, I don't think I have anything else. I will prepare materials, get it to you quickly. We'll go over those next week. And I think I'll also, as Smitha indicated, put together a schedule going forward for how I think things could play out from here, and give us a target as to how we're going to get to a finish line. And then we can adjust that as necessary. So I think that that's probably a good way to proceed.
Sounds good. I know a number of us are a little bit more vocal than others, so I just, in the few minutes we have left, Desmond, Jen, I'm trying to see who else is on here, Elizabeth, and Mayor, Hoydick, Mary. Is there anything else that you want to add to the conversation? I don't want to monopolize it and leave anybody out.
Chris, it's Laura. I wanted to just share a recent experience with data, because I understand what you're saying, Beth, and you know I agree with you predominantly. We struggle with data and representing Stratford-centric on the data that's regional in the metro area all the time. We just submitted 2 EPA grants where we literally had to scrub things down to make sure the numbers that were reported were correct. And then we changed some of them because we had updated data. So I think that's going to be a constant. We're always going to have to look at it. The methodology, though, is great to state and have published with whatever we do. But we are the Bridgeport region. And as much as I hear you, Beth, I think we have to define what it is and how it's represented. I think that's half the battle.
If I may add to that, the other challenge we're going to have is the 2020 census results are due to be released probably starting, I would say, late spring of next year. And so the data suddenly is going to start changing from these ACS estimates, which are based on a very small sample size, to something which is a larger sample size and won't have margins of error associated with it. So we're always going to be chasing data. So I think the question is, as Beth and the mayor pointed out, show what's out there and how it was established, created, and recognize the data is going to change, and we just need to be aware of that.
Okay, anybody else?
Chris,
Okay.
it's Laura. It's Laura.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Laura, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to thank everybody for the time they put into this, and the passion and the energy. It's not easy. It's probably one of the more difficult things that I've been a part of. And I guess in the middle of anything, you kind of, when you're going down for, you think it's the third time, it's the final time, and then something buoys you up. I think we are doing a really good job. I think we're doing a great, we're developing a great process and hopefully great work product for Stratford. We need it. I'm sorry that the state had to mandate us to do it, but I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're having these open and very frank conversations. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership as well. It's a journey with not the best map in the world to go through, so we're trying to do our best, and but I know everybody here is dedicated to making sure we come away with a quality product that will serve our town well. So I echo those comments, Mayor, and I appreciate everybody's help. Okay, in that case, I think we're about ready. So I think we'll take a motion to adjourn. Would that be appropriate?
So moved.
Moved by Beth, second by Harold. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Carries unanimously. We're out at 1:58. Everybody have a good weekend. Happy Halloween. We'll talk to you next week.
Happy Halloween, Chris. Thank you.
Happy Halloween.